Ho Chi Minh was the main Vietnamese nationalist and revolutionary leader. As a young man, he traveled to France, the UK, and the US, where he picked up interest in politics and communism. After his return to Vietnam, he founded the Indochina Vietnamese Party in 1931 and the Viet Minh in 1941. He led the Vietnamese Communist Party against the French, Japanese, American influence in Vietnam and sought to unify the North and South. He died 6 years before Vietnam fell under communist rule. The capital of South Vietnam was renamed Ho Chi Minh City. Vo Nguyen Giap was the commander-in-chief for Vietnam's People Army, Ho Chi Minh's leading general, and a Vietnamese politician. Previously, he was a lawyer as well as a history teacher. With his knowledge and brilliance, he was able to play a large role in the Battle of Dien Bien Phu and the final Ho Chi Minh campaign. In these, he defeated the French, ending the First Indochina War, and the final Ho Chi Minh campaign led to the eventual fall of Saigon. He was also greatly responsible for the catastrophe of the 1968 Tet Offensive, where they'd lost thousands of soldiers. After the war, he still served as a Minister of Defense and a member of the Political Bureau of the Communist Party of Vietnam. In 2011, Giap celebrated his 100th birthday and became the oldest Vietnamese political and military figure that had ever lived. Bao Dai was the Emperor of Vietnam from 1926 to 1945. He was a powerless and ineffective leader known as a puppet ruler. After Viet Minh revolted against him, he was forced to surrender his throne and then he fled to Hong Kong. Ngo Dinh Diem was the president of South Vietnamese Republic of Vietnam and was supported by the U.S. Diem was Catholic, but this contradicted Vietnam's majority Buddhist population. Diem's persecution of Buddhists and abuse of power led to religious protests and made him an unpopular and corrupt leader. Due to this, he lost U.S. support and was assassinated in 1963 by a coup. Nguyen Van Thieu was a military general who served in the French-controlled Vietnamese army. Thieu was in the military coup that sought to overthrow Ngo Dinh Diem. Replacing President Nguyen Cao Khai in 1967, he became the president of the Republic of Vietnam during the war. He too, like Diem, was accused of corruption but stayed president till the final days of the war. In his farewell speech, he stated, "I resign, but I do not desert." Dwight D. Eisenhower was the Republican 34th President of the United States from 1953 to 1961. He popularized the domino effect, which was later used by the U.S. government to justify involvement in Vietnam. Under Eisenhower, there was no real involvement except aiding the French. After France lost to the Viet Minh, Eisenhower backed up anti-communist leader Ngo Dinh Diem. John F. Kennedy was the 35th President of the United States from 1961 to 1963. Kennedy sent U.S. military into Vietnam in 1962, which marked the first official U.S. involvement in the country. Ngo Dinh Diem was assassinated, and so was Kennedy a few weeks after. Lyndon B. Johnson was the 36th President of the United States after Kennedy's assassination in 1963 to 1968. He promised to keep Kennedy's limited involvement in Vietnam, but ended up steadily increasing the number of troops in Vietnam. Under Johnson's presidency, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution passed. Despite America's resistance to the war, Johnson continued to send troops to Vietnam. Under Johnson, the involvement of the U.S. war escalated immensely from 16,000 American soldiers in 1963 to 550,000 in early 1968. This led to him having poor approval rates from the American public. Richard M. Nixon, also previously Vice President to Johnson, became the 37th President of America who served from 1969 to 1974. He created a policy of Vietnamization to withdraw troops from Vietnam and give more responsibility to South Vietnam. But secretly, he enlarged the war by taking illegal military action in Cambodia and Laos. During Nixon's final year in office, the last U.S. combat soldiers left Vietnam, but some military stayed.
Major battles. The Vietnam War began in 1954 and ended in April of 1975. The first major battle of the war was the Battle of Ap Bac on January 2, 1963. It was fought by the Army of the Republic of Vietnam and National Front for Liberation. The battle resulted in heavy casualties, including 2,500 troops of South Vietnam's 7th Infantry. This battle exemplified poor performances in both the fighting ability and the spirit of the South Vietnam forces compared to the North, who won their first major battle. The Battle of Le Dring, which lasted from November 14th through the 18th of 1965, was the first major battle between the U.S. and People's Army of Vietnam troops. The American troops relied heavily on air mobility and artillery fire, and the Viet Cong fought at close range in order to neutralize the Americans' advantage. This battle resulted in heavy casualties for both sides. The Battle of Khe Sanh lasted from January 21st to April 9th of 1968. It took place in Khe Sanh and lasted 77 days, resulting in 10,000 deaths. On January 30th, 1968, North Vietnamese and Viet Cong troops launched the Tet Offensive. It was a series of aggressive and planned-out surprise attacks on over 100 major towns all over South Vietnam. At first, their attempt was successful, but then the communists were repelled within several hours or days. It was a massive military defeat and considered a turning point in the war. In March of 1968, shortly after the Tet Offensive, the My Lai Massacre was an American search and destroy mission to root out Viet Cong in northern parts of South Vietnam. They found no men of fighting age, but still shot over 504 males ranging from ages 3 to 80. Additionally, they raped, clubbed, and stabbed women and mutilated people. The Viet Cong invaded the capital of Saigon in April of 1975 after the majority of American soldiers were evacuated out of Vietnam. General Duong Van Minh announced South Vietnam surrender the day after Vietnamization concluded. The Viet Cong faces no resistance as Saigon was peacefully handed over and renamed Ho Chi Minh City.
The Bell UH-1 helicopter, also known as the Huey, was the workhorse for Army assault units. First flown in 1956, it can go at a maximum speed of 135 miles per hour. Its light and small structure enables it to land in small spaces, making it easy to transport troops, equipment, and evacuate wounded soldiers. We can assume that the Huey was probably the chopper that O'Brien, the character, refers to, the same one that Mary Ann arrived in, as well as took Ted Lavender, Kurt Lemon, and Rat Kiley Way in after their injuries. During the full duration of the war, more than 7,000 Hueys were used, significantly increasing the war efficiency. Where the average soldier saw 40 days of combat in 4 years during World War II, the Huey allowed for 240 days of combat in 1 year during the Vietnam War. Today, it is still used in more than 60 air forces around the world. Napalm is a chemical weapon that originates as powder, which can be mixed with gasoline to make a bomb that easily explodes on impact. Once ignited, napalm can burn up to 5,000 degrees and be propelled at a greater distance than gasoline. It releases large amounts of carbon monoxide when it explodes, and therefore the poisonous air it emits causes greater damage than traditional bombs. The M60 machine gun is an artillery weapon that can be mounted or operated from a helicopter or tank. It can fire up to 550 bullets in quick succession, but its cartridge belt weighs a significant amount, therefore limiting the ammunition that soldiers can carry. This artillery gun is found on Henry Dobbins, weighing 23 pounds unloaded, but which was almost always loaded, along with 10 to 15 pounds of ammunition draped in belts across his chest and shoulders. By the mid-1960s, most main forces of the Viet Cong troops were armed with Chinese versions of the Russian AK-47 submachine gun. While American troops mainly used the M16 machine gun, the Viet Congs were found with the AK-47. Mine detectors were also used in the Vietnam War. The book talks about how the soldiers took turns humping the 28-pound mine detector for missions that are known to be dangerous with grounds full of toe poppers or landmines and bouncing betties or grenades. The instrument's tremendous weight added severe stress on the lower back and shoulders of the soldiers. The detector consists of two pieces, a set of headphones and a big sensing plate. The detector was awkward to handle and often useless because of the shrapnel in the earth. Shrapnel is inactive fragments from a bomb that had already exploded but possessed the same metal elements as mine detectors. Many of Viet Cong's weapons, such as booby traps and mines, were homemade in the villages. They were composed of simple objects, such as tin cans or discarded wires.
During the war, the U.S. started to split into two, people that supported the war and those who did not. Many people tried to avoid the draft. They were known as draft dodgers, fleeing to Canada or any other excuse that would relieve them of their duties. By the end of the war, 58,000 lives were lost. The people were angry because we ultimately had no success in the war. Nixon pulled troops out of North Vietnam, and the North eventually overcame South Vietnam. We lost time, money, and most importantly, our people. Those who did come home were not treated with honor or respect. Everyone wanted to forget, but the soldiers would have to carry their experiences for the rest of their lives. There was very little nationalistic pride at this time, especially in comparison to World War II. After Vietnam, there was a tremendous shift from patriotism to a distrust of the government and its leaders.